put a lot of work into my typecast blogs to make them look more prepared than maybe they actually were. And then one day recently I woke up and realized there's something organic and beautiful about the imperfections. What if it had its own patina of use and age and history?
Well, good day, everybody. This is Joe Van Cleve. Welcome back to the Typewriter video series. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about how perfect should your typewritten typecast blog article be. If you're a typecaster, if you're using typewriters, writing pieces, as I call them, scanning or photographing them, putting them on a blog somewhere on the internet, how perfect should this appear? So a little bit of confession time. I've been self-conscious for years as a blogger about how my typewritten things looked on my blog. So your choice of language, your sentence structure, your spelling especially, can reflect upon maybe your education or your sophistication. You could become caught up in this thing where you're very self-conscious about your education and how you appear to other people.
There's something organic and beautiful about the imperfections.
I was always kind of self-conscious about my typecasting, and early on when I got into typecast blogging, I would often write a blog article by hand and then edit it, spell check it. Any word that, as I was writing a sentence, any word that I wasn't sure about, I would underline it and then put a note in the margin, like SP for spelling. And then I would go back when I was done with it, after I did all the editing of the sentence structure to my liking, I would go back and spell check all those words. But more recently, in the last few years, I've been more doing typecasting spontaneously on typewriters for several reasons. I think I wanted to get more into the frame of mind of wanting to be spontaneously a writer on a typewriter, but with that becomes a risk. The risk is, of course, you're going to misspell words, and you're going to have kind of stilted or awkward sentence structure, etc., etc. And the other part of this, of being self-conscious as a blogger, is how your typing looks. Do you make a lot of typographical errors? Is the machine you're using less than perfect? Does it skip or pile up letters, or maybe the letters are uneven? Are you self-conscious about all that? Does it even matter, really? And that's a kind of a really good question that I've been thinking about lately. So as I've been typecasting more and more with various machines in my collection, I come to realize that with manual typewriters, it's simply normal to expect a less than professionally printed appearance. That's just the nature of the manual typewriter. And that's something that it took me years to get over. In fact, I think back in the early 80s, when I started getting interested in finding a typewriter for myself, I was looking for a typewriter that could make like IBM Selectric grade quality imprint, because I was wanting to self-publish some poetry, really. I went down the wrong hole for years. I got a electronic daisy wheel typewriter with the idea that the quality of the imprint was the most important thing. Didn't understand anything about publishing or whatever, or writing for that matter. Now that I've been into typewriters for a while, and especially manuals, I realize that all the typewriters I've had and I've used, none of them are perfect. No manual typewriter puts out a perfect imprint. That's just the way they are. You have to accept it. And so that's when I got more into the aesthetics of the way the typewritten piece looks. Two different machines. I have two pieces here. One typed on Royal Quiet Deluxe with a silk ribbon. The other one typed on this Smith Corona Skywriter with a blue ribbon, a blue nylon ribbon. Two different appearances, two different typefaces, certainly. That's when I started getting more into the look of the paper itself. And I started initially changing off from using regular white multi-purpose copy paper into using the greenish engineering paper that had the grid on the back side. I did that for years, blogged with it, because I like that kind of alternative color to it. It's just an interesting tone to the paper, made it more interesting, and that little faint grid that shows up on the backside, from the backside of the paper, gave it an interesting kind of texture and background that I thought was cool. But more recently, I've been interested in, as I go to thrift stores and things, I recently came across this little small section of a larger legal pad. This is old paper, old stock paper, and it's slightly off-white just from the age of it. And it had a little bit of discoloration along the edge on the front and back sides of most of the sheets, right along the edge, that kind of reminded me somewhat of a coffee stain. I'm not really sure where it came from. It could have been like exposed to dirty rainwater or something. So I got to thinking the other day as I wrote a piece on this machine. In fact, I think it was this piece right here. And it had this really slight discoloration right up at the top. And I love the way that thing looked. You know, the slight off-white, yellowish color of the paper, that stain that kind of looks like coffee. The other night, it just sort of hit me, hey, why don't we purposefully coffee stain or tea stain your typing paper before you actually use it? And so this here was a first attempt at that. And I had a cup of coffee at the desk yesterday morning, and of course it has cream and sugar in it. If you're going to do this purposefully, I'd probably advise not to use cream and sugar. Whatever you use, whether it's tea or coffee to stain the paper, it's going to make the paper non-archival, okay, just because of the acids in the liquid, either tea or coffee. It'll cause the paper to degenerate prematurely. So this is not like an archival thing. It's more of kind of an affectation, I guess. But so I had my coffee mug, and I just dipped my finger in the coffee and ran it around the rim of the cup and then set it on the paper. And I actually did that in this pack of paper to various sheets of it and experimenting with it. And now I have a supply of at least 3 of these sheets are nicely stained with coffee rings in different spots. So as I blog in the upcoming next few weeks, I'll have a supply of this paper to try out. But I think this is kind of fun. I think there's something that harkens back to the idea of a well-used piece of paper. It's been on a desk. Someone put a cup of coffee on it or whatever. It's been kept in less than perfect condition, and yet you can type on it. I like the look of it. And actually, particularly, I like the look of this slightly off-white paper with these yellowish-brown coffee stains with the blue ink from the blue ribbon here on the Smith Corona Skywriter. I really think those colors match really well, work together well. Well, there's an idea for you guys. Why have perfect paper when you can use raggy, old, dirty, stained paper and stain it even more and make it into your own little thing for typecast blogging? Now, I admit, you don't want to do this if you're going to send a nice letter to somebody. That's not what this is for. You know, if you're a pen pal with a typewriter, you probably don't want to do this because they're going to think, he doesn't really care very much about me, because if he's going to use this dirty old stained paper, my goodness. But I think for blogging, if you're a typecast blogger, there's a certain style to it. It's sort of like graphic arts. I know in a lot of graphic arts programs, Photoshop or whatever, you can probably find background effects to a document that you can add in that'll make it look like it's stained paper. But this is sort of more the real thing. This is physically emulating that yourself. So if you're going to do this, I recommend make up some nice dark black coffee or black tea. Make it nice and strong. Wait for it to cool down a little bit. Take yourself a coffee cup or a drinking glass. Put some of this along the bottom of it, and then sit it on the paper. Let it sit for a few minutes. Let it soak in. Take it off. Do it a couple different ways, maybe a couple different drops, a couple different sized cups or mugs, so the circles are different sized. And you can even take a little brush or a Q-tip and maybe put a little bit along the edges to darken, stain the edges. Anyways, give it a patina of age, and it's kind of a fun thing to do, to play with. The thing about typewriters and typecasting is there's no rules. This isn't like in typing class back in the day where you had a certain way you typed because this was for business and everything was proper and prim and everything. No, it's a new era with the rediscovery of typewriters. We can do whatever we want with them. They're creative tools. So let's get creative. Let's put some stains on paper and type on top of it. And if you guys do that, and if you do blog, I'd like to see your results. I'd like you to leave a link down below showing me, a typewritten piece that you put on your blog that kind of stain the paper and kind of has that old look to it. That'd be very fun. Well, I hope this gives you guys some ideas on how to stay creative and how to use your typewriters and your typewritten pieces as kind of a visual effect that might be interesting to do. So the previous typewriter video series, episode 127, talking about typing styles, I presented a challenge to you guys to tell me what was your preferred typing method, touch typist, quasi-touch typist, 2 or 3 fingers or so. And do you need to touch type to be a writer? That last question was, of course, a loaded question. But I was interested in the answers, and I really enjoyed the participation of all you guys. It was great to have the feedback. Yeah, it was intended as a way to provoke you into responding. And I love the dialogue that we get through these kinds of questions. But the results are interesting. So it looks like 5 of you are predominantly touch typists when you're using a typewriter. 4 of you are quasi-touch typists, and there are another 4 that are less than quasi-touch typists, let's say 2 or 3 fingers or so. Of the touch typists in the group, 1 of you says that you enjoy to touch type while you're watching TV. You sit in front of the TV with a typewriter, and that's really interesting. I'd like to know, are you spontaneous? I think this was Diane. Are you spontaneously like typing comments about the show while you're watching it, or what? What are you typing? I'm curious about that. Another of you, like Hemingway, likes to stand while you type, and I thought that was very cool. And then of the group of people that predominantly like to use 2 or 3 fingers, Rod Serling was mentioned as an example of a person who used 2 fingers and was, of course, a famous writer and screenwriter. And another of you mentioned that you like to look at the keyboard while you type. And I think that's an interesting point. I think it's difficult not to look at the keyboard. If you are anything other than a true touch typist, you probably are going to look at the keyboard, only because your hands aren't going to be exactly centered every time to be able to hit the right key without looking, unless you hover right on the keys like you would as a touch typist. So yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, looking at the keys, that is true. And I tend to do a lot of up and down. I look at what I'm writing on the paper, if the imprint happened properly, if it didn't skip or whatever, and then I'm looking down as I'm typing. I'm constantly going back and forth. Very cool. Now, the second question, the loaded question, do you need to touch type to be a writer? Obviously, it was a loaded question. 9 responses indicated no, but interestingly, 1 of you said yes, in the sense that apparently the speed of writing, you couldn't get anything done if you had to hunt and peck. So touch typing for you was important to be a writer. I thought that was a very interesting response, in the sense of the speed of writing for you was important. Well, that was fun, and I really enjoyed the results from this little impromptu poll of how you guys type, what is your typing style, and how that affects you as a writer. And that was very cool to see. Thank you very much for the participation. I'm going to try to do more of these kind of interactive questions in this future series as we go along. And until next time, as always, you guys have yourselves a great day.